3 years ago, a man proposed to Adele, promising to wait for her, no matter how long it took. 3 years have passed. Today, he takes out a diamond ring. He asks Adele, "You have the best eye for these things. Could you tell me, do you think Noella would like this?" Adele freezes. Noella is her younger sister. So, this man, her childhood friend, the one who had pursued her relentlessly, the one who swore he would wait for her, has transferred his affections and is now proposing to her sister? Upon hearing the news, Adele's maid explodes, furiously declaring him a scoundrel. She insists on fetching Noella to confront the situation. But after a brief moment of dejection, Adele picks up her documents and continues her work. Romance, to her, was always a dispensable luxury. Inheriting the family business was her priority, and being reborn as the eldest daughter and heir to the wealthiest oil merchant family in the empire, she was more than satisfied. In her previous life, she was an ordinary woman whose biggest dream was to be a wealthy heiress. She yearned to experience the thrill of opulence and the drama of inheritance disputes. Then, one fateful slip into the water. Her dream became reality. She was reborn into a novel she had read. Her father was the richest man in the land, and she became the esteemed Lady Adele, daughter of a count. Adele was highly driven. She dedicated at least 20 hours a day to her studies. This earned her immense favor with her father, who wholeheartedly groomed her as his successor. Perhaps this also led her to become overly absorbed in her work, neglecting matters of the heart. But was Noella truly innocent? That evening, she knocked on Adele's door. Wearing a pitiful expression, she immediately began to apologize. "I'm so sorry, sister. I never dreamed Joe would like me. It's all my fault. Anything to make you feel better." But before she could finish, Adele dismissed her. No one knew better than Adele what kind of manipulative game Noella was playing. Just then, there was a noise outside the window. A man with dark hair and crimson eyes climbed in. He was Adele's devoted younger half-brother, Caden. If Adele so much as frowned, his expression would darken. "Shall I get rid of him for you? Just say the word, and I'll kill him." Once, after Adele had been insulted publicly, the offender had lost an arm the next day. That was Caden, her Yandera half-brother. She remembered the first time she met him. He was covered in blood, cradled in the butler's arms. The first words he spoke to Adele were, "Please don't kill me. I'm not interested in money or inheritance." Looking at the frail boy, Adele felt a surge of compassion. She not only gave him the name Caden, but also protected him as he grew. He eventually took over the family's underground operations, secretly eliminating those obsessed with wealth. Now, having heard about Jur's betrayal, the color drained from Caden's eyes. Adele quickly intervened. "Don't you dare do anything rash. I still have use for him." Caden gave a sinister smile and prepared to leave through the window. But before he left, he asked, "Sister, that wicked woman, Noella, how long do you intend to keep her around?" Adele fell silent. Having read the novel, how could she not know Noella's villainous role? But she didn't want to waste her time on someone who was destined to die. In the original story, Noella was actually the initial heroine. However, her excessive naivete didn't sit well with readers accustomed to more compelling narratives, forcing the author to rewrite her as the malicious second female lead. Her ultimate fate was a tragic death at the age of 20. Adele was focused on her own ambitions. She had been somewhat lenient towards Noella, intending to let her live peacefully until she reached 20. But at the family's regular banquet the following day, Noella unexpectedly arrived arm in arm with her new lover. The guests were instantly stunned. This was the man who had publicly declared his love for Adele. Now, he was flaunting his relationship with her younger sister. The air crackled with the delicious scent of scandal. Not wanting to be the center of gossip, Adele stepped onto the balcony for some fresh air. Noella, however, followed close behind. "I'm so sorry, sister," she began. "I told you we should arrive separately, but he insisted on coming with me." This unremarkable man had somehow managed to charm both sisters. 3 years ago, he had proposed to Adele, vowing with absolute certainty that he would marry her. Now, he attended the banquet hand in hand with her sister. But Adele was magnanimous. She wasn't angry. She even offered her blessings to the happy couple. After all, Noella's life was destined to be short. Besides, Adele's dream was to inherit the family business and become incredibly wealthy. Despite her childhood connection with Ja, if he and her sister truly loved each other, it was better to let them be happy and free herself Adele even considered her sister's future. When father returns, I'll explain everything to him. But blinded by her own confidence, Adele failed to notice the pity in Noella's eyes. She also overlooked how the noble women who had once flocked around her were now surrounding her sister. Then, a man appeared. He was Adele's cousin. With a hint of mockery, he asked, "So, I guess you won't be getting married now, will you? But surely you know the heir must be married, right?" This news struck Adele like a bolt of lightning. Before the banquet even ended, Adele sought out the butler. She demanded to know why she had never heard of this rule. Perhaps everyone assumed that since Adele was the eldest, the legitimate daughter, and exceptionally capable, clearly favored by the count, even without a political marriage at her coming-of-age ceremony, there was still Ja. They were surely destined to wed. But Ja had chosen Noella. A thought sparked in Adele's mind. She asked the butler if her father had left any messages. The butler mentioned a letter the count had sent a few days prior, instructing them to prepare for Adele's wedding upon his return. Only then would her position as heir be secure. And the letter had been given to her by Noella. Adele, who always prided herself on her meticulous planning, had been outmaneuvered by the sister she least respected. She clenched her fists. Adele contemplated killing her sister. She could tolerate Noella's stealing her fiancé, but she couldn't accept her birthright being snatched away. Love was nothing compared to wealth and power. Her maid urged her to calm down. They could complain to the count when he returned. But Adele knew her father. He was cold, ruthless, and driven solely by profit. If he learned his younger daughter had stolen his elder daughter's fiancé, he would likely just commend Noella's resourcefulness. Then, a sudden inspiration struck Adele. I'll find a new husband. A three-legged toad might be hard to find, but two-legged men are everywhere. As long as she found someone taller, more handsome, wealthier, more capable, and with impeccable character before her father's return, she could easily justify her choice. He dumped Ja and moved on to someone else. But as soon as she laid out the conditions, Adele deflated. Where am I going to find someone like that? Her maid fretted too. A high-quality man like that, probably only among the holy knights at the church. The words ignited a spark in Adele. The very next day, she boarded a carriage on a husband-hunting expedition. On the road, her maid asked if she was serious. Adele's expression was resolute. I must inherit the family business. Therefore, I absolutely must bring back a husband. The maid, eyeing the overflowing chest of gold coins, asked, "My lady, why do you need so much money to find a husband?" Adele's reasoning was perfectly sound. I can't very well go empty-handed, can I? And to delay her father, the count's, return, she had sought out her younger half-brother, Caden, and spun a little white lie, asking him to destroy the bridge her father would have to cross on his way home. The maid couldn't help but wonder, why not just ask the young master to bring someone back? Adele, lost in thought, recalled her unpredictable and somewhat volatile younger brother. He always radiated a murderous aura around women. If he knew about this, he would simply ask, "How do you want him to die?" However, Caden, who seemed ferocious to outsiders, was as docile as a large puppy in front of his older sister. Soon, Adele and her maid arrived at the church. Unfortunately, the bishop, who could have helped her, was absent. Unwilling to return empty-handed, Adele knocked on another door. She stepped inside, surprised to find the room shrouded in darkness. A deep voice resonated within, accompanied by a faint echo, driven by the need to secure her inheritance. The daughter of the count had embarked on a quest for a husband, and now, it seemed, she had reached her destination. The man before her possessed striking white hair and captivating emerald eyes. Bathed in sunlight, he appeared almost divine. Adele was utterly captivated, momentarily speechless. The man's repeated calls finally snapped her out of her trance. Before he could even introduce himself, Adele, with her sharp intellect, deduced his identity from subtle clues and observations. "Commander of the Knights," she stated, "it's a pleasure to meet you." Her words made the man's eyes widen, a flicker of wariness in their depths. He asked how she knew. Unbeknownst to him, with a single glance, she had not only discerned his rank, but also realized he must be new to this post. Otherwise, young women would have undoubtedly beaten a path to the church doors, eager to drag him home as a husband. Yes, a husband, gazing at his handsome features and listening to his steady voice. A significant question arose in Adele's mind. She had come here hoping the bishop would recommend a suitable match. "So, why is business good for you?" she inquired. He was so young, yet already successful, a prominent figure in the church. With this thought, Adele composed herself, deciding to probe further. "My name is Adele. Might I ask your name?" The man politely replied. "Gilead." Adele continued. "You seem so young. Around the same age as my younger brother, perhaps." Thinking she was implying he was too young, Gilead frowned slightly. "I'm 27. Adele's heart leaped with joy. She was 21. But, she pressed, being so young, "I imagine your wife must be a great beauty." Gilead's voice was cool as he stated, "I'm not married." For the first time in her life, Adele, a staunch atheist, felt a surge of faith. "Thank you, God, for sending him to me." But there was one final, crucial question. "Do you like golden hair? Like, say, someone who looks like an angel?" This time, before she could finish, the man interrupted. "First of all, Gilead hates blondes. Secondly, I don't believe angels exist." With that declaration, Adele's last hesitation vanished. She stepped forward, her gaze steady and resolute. "Let's get married." Driven by her need to secure a husband, Adele made a bold promise. "Whether you desire gold, jewels, fame, or fortune, I will utilize my family's influence to help you attain everything you desire." Gilead was taken aback. They had only just met. "You don't even know me." Adele, undeterred, launched into a detailed explanation, reciting everything she had gleaned about him from his micro-expressions and subtle cues. "And if that's not enough," she added, "we can always get to know each other better." Unsurprisingly, Gilead declined her proposal. Even though he wasn't seeking love, he understood that Adele's motivation stemmed from her need to inherit her family's estate. She needed a suitable husband to secure her position. In essence, it was a marriage of convenience, a mutually beneficial arrangement. Despite this, Gilead still rejected her. Adele was disheartened. She knew he wouldn't be easy to win over, but she hadn't anticipated this level of difficulty. For now, she had no choice but to leave. But as she glanced back at him, a flicker of something crossed Gilead's face. Her offer had shaken his convictions. It made him question his own beliefs. Who am I really pursuing? He wondered. Meanwhile, Adele, not giving up, tossed a bag of gold coins at his feet. "I'll pave a path for you with gold," she declared. Flowers are so cliché. It seemed this extravagant young lady believed in the power of money. To her surprise, Gilead, breaking his silence, scooped her up and carried her back towards her carriage. The maid, waiting outside the church, rushed forward as she saw Adele emerge. "What happened, my lady?" From behind them, Gilead's polite voice rang out. "With the new moon rising, there's a risk of monsters in the area. Allow me to escort you to the main road." This seemingly cold and indifferent man's sudden concern irritated Adele. She gave a curt nod, declining his offer, and hurried away with her maid. "I'll just take a different route," she muttered. "Huh, he's back again." Her father had taught her from a young age, never give up on your goals. Besides, if she didn't bring back a husband, any husband, she might find herself with nowhere to go. After seeing Adele off, Gilead's room was suddenly filled with his fellow knights. Adele's appearance had caused quite a stir amongst them. She was beautiful, from a wealthy family, generations of affluence. To marry her would be a life-altering event. Their excited chatter filled the room, making Gilead slightly uncomfortable. He shooed them out, but one comment lingered in his mind. After a moment of hesitation, he recalled their earlier encounter. The cold, aloof holy knight who disliked women and preferred to serve his God, and a woman, born into wealth, who cared little for faith and much for money. From the moment they met, he had sensed a clash of personalities. He had dismissed her from the church, but when he overheard the knights discussing the dangers of monsters lurking on the roads and the risks to travelers, Gilead rushed out the door. His staunch resolve seemed to be crumbling, but before he could take 2 steps, he ran into the noblewoman and her 2 attendants. A sixth sense compelled him to pause and observe. Adele's raven black hair flowed around her as she greeted him with a radiant smile. "We meet again." Gilead, seeing her return so soon after leaving, remained silent and turned to go. Her maid, ever cautious, inquired softly, "Are we really staying here, my lady?" Adele had been gambling, but seeing Gilead again, she knew she'd wagered correctly. A man so consistently aloof, visibly shaken by her presence. The realization brought a spontaneous smile to her lips. A devout woman named Rebecca, standing nearby, frowned. She disliked Adele. She saw only desire in Adele's eyes, a woman unworthy of the church's sanctity. So, after Adele and her maid departed, Rebecca spoke ill of the noble woman to the head devout woman. Meanwhile, Adele, her spirits high, strolled around the grounds, her gaze lingering on the young knights training in the courtyard. "We've come to the right place," she murmured. "This is heaven." A voice interrupted her reverie. It was Reynard, the vice commander of the knights. He made no attempt to hide his admiration for Adele, from complimenting her beauty to offering his assistance in any matter. He practically begged for her contact information. But just as their conversation grew animated, Gilead appeared, his expression icy. "You seem to have a lot of free time," he observed. "Is the training too easy?" Under the weight of his commander's gaze, Reynard quickly excused himself. Gilead and Adele were left alone. He urged her to return home. Her presence here served no purpose. He wouldn't change his mind and accept her proposal. Adele chuckled softly. "You don't think I came back to change your mind, do you?" Gilead frowned. "Then why did you return?" After proposing marriage upon their first meeting and being rejected, she now changed her tune. "I have to bring home a husband," she explained. "It doesn't really matter who." This unexpected turn of events stunned Gilead. He'd assumed she was pursuing him. Now, it seemed he'd been mistaken. He walked away, a strange mix of emotions swirling within him. After he left, her maid asked, "Have you really given up on the commander, my lady?" Adele smiled slyly. "Why settle for a small son when you've seen the real thing?" Her apparent disinterest was a tactic to lower his guard and capture his attention. By feigning a shift in her objective, she hoped to bridge the distance between them. Unfortunately, she wasn't the only one vying for the handsome commander's attention. When assigning tasks, Rebecca led Adele and her maid to a small room and gestured toward the mountain of dirty dishes. "I'll leave these to you," she said. Rebecca's animosity towards Adele was blatant. She disapproved of Adele's boldness and the way she looked at the commander. Her goal was clear: to make Adele's stay so unpleasant that she would leave. Adele, however, saw through Rebecca's petty scheme. With a faint smile, she accepted the dishwashing task. Her lack of anger stemmed from an understanding of Rebecca's frustration. Besides, starting a conflict with someone here wouldn't help her find a husband. So, Adele tied back her hair, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Hours passed, and evening arrived. The usually empty dining hall was inexplicably packed. Clearly, the knights were eager to catch a glimpse of the noblewoman. Their enthusiasm was palpable. Then, Gilead appeared amongst them. Unlike the other knights, who were drawn to Adele, he radiated a chilling aura, a silent warning. "Stay away from my knights." The meal was nearly over, but Adele was still nowhere to be seen. The head devout woman asked Rebecca, "Where is Lady Adele?" Rebecca glanced at Gilead, then feigned innocence. "The chores I gave her weren't difficult. Perhaps she's just not used to manual labor." She added, "Perhaps the lady is intentionally avoiding dinner. After all, she's been raised in luxury. I doubt she'd appreciate such simple fare." Gilead started to leave, but a bright voice stopped him in his tracks. "A lady who paves roads with gold for a stranger and has waterfalls of wine at home," Adele announced, carrying a plate of potatoes. "Request you move aside, please." Panic flared in Rebecca's eyes. First, her gossip had been overheard by its subject. Second, she couldn't believe Adele had finished washing hundreds of dishes in just a few hours. At the sight of Adele, Gilead returned to his seat. When she questioned his presence, he replied without missing a beat, "I haven't finished eating." Adele inwardly chuckled. He was clearly guarding against her, suspecting her of ulterior motives towards his knights. Little did he know he was the prey, but she was too hungry for conversation. Peeling a boiled potato and taking a bite, she nearly levitated with joy. She was famished. Rebecca, recovering from her initial shock, chimed in, "You don't have to force yourself to eat this, my lady. We all know you come from a wealthy family. Surely, you wouldn't enjoy such simple food." Adele thought, she's practically begging for a takedown. So, she began by chastising Rebecca. "How can you speak so poorly of potatoes? Every morsel of food is precious." Then, addressing Rebecca's earlier comment, she explained, "My family's wine waterfalls? Those are to stimulate the wine market. The fruit grown in our villas? Those are cultivated in greenhouses to produce superior varieties, which we then sell to the public at affordable prices. As a prominent family, we have a responsibility to improve the lives of the people." Every word dripped with wealth, a subtle mockery of Rebecca's lack of worldliness. As expected, Rebecca flushed with anger under the sheer weight of Adele's opulence. As Adele stood, Reynard asked if she was finished eating. She smiled. "I was hoping for some bread, but it seems I'm too late." Instantly, loaves of bread appeared from all directions. Adele declined them all, saying, "I'll try to arrive earlier next time," and departed. Gilead had remained silent throughout, but as he watched her leave, the bustling dining hall suddenly felt strangely empty. The head devout woman, noticing his shift in mood, asked if he was all right. Gilead, masking his feelings, replied, "I'm fine. It's just rather noisy in here." The head devout woman gestured to the bread in his hand. "And who is that for?" Gilead thought, "I've never met a woman like her. So uncouth, outwardly extravagant, shamelessly bold. She proposed marriage after a single meeting. Yet, he couldn't stop thinking about her. I must be mad." He knew she was unsuitable, a dangerous distraction. But his tranquil life had been undeniably disrupted, ripples spreading through the still water. Why else would he have been holding bread when she mentioned wanting some, as if waiting to offer it to her? This shift in his emotions frightened him. He couldn't afford distractions, not until he obtained that. Pulling on his cloak, he counted down in his mind. 13 days until the bishop returns. Until then, I must remain unmoved. No matter what she says, no matter the amusement in her eyes. He was startled by a rustling in the bushes. Adele emerged, holding a candle, muttering complaints under her breath. Seeing Gilead, she froze in surprise. Recovering, she noticed his damp sleeve, likely splashed by the waterfall. Silently, she thanked Rebecca. If the woman hadn't scrutinized his dishwashing and found it faultless, she wouldn't have sent him out in the middle of the night to gather twigs for new dishwashing brushes. This chance encounter wouldn't have happened. Flustered, she explained it was all a coincidence. Gilead stared, silent, until finally he spoke. "Are you unaware of the monsters in these woods? Why are you so persistent?" Adele's playful facade dropped. "Everyone has their burdens," she told him. "Things others can't understand. What you can't understand is my life's purpose. For that, I would move mountains. I would cut down every tree." Bathed in moonlight, her unwavering resolve shone like a beacon, piercing his heart. He took the basket from her hands. "Let's go. You said it was late, and you needed to return." Adele paused, stunned. "You're going to make me misunderstand." Turning, Gilead offered a barely perceptible smile. "Then misunderstand me. An innocent, pure-hearted boy and a possessive, doting younger brother," she mused. She could stab both. Under the moonlight, the usually aloof holy night was smiling. Adele blinked, thinking she was imagining it. She leaned closer, and Gilead suddenly bolted. Each time she neared, he quickened his pace. They continued this strange dance all the way back to the church. Seeing his impassive face once more, Adele was certain. I must have been mistaken. As they parted, she urged him to return quickly and be careful on the road. "Are you concerned for me?" he asked. Adele laughed. "Compared to dangerous monsters, I'm far more dangerous." Her bluntness stunned him. Adele, having delivered her blow, turned and left, leaving him to ponder her words. In the following days, Rebecca searched tirelessly for some leverage against Adele, but found nothing. Everyone in the church, except for her, sang Adele's praises. How could she possibly get rid of her? Glancing at Gilead beside her, Rebecca felt a surge of gratitude. Thank goodness the commander is wise. Unfazed by that wicked woman's beauty, she took the opportunity to voice her disapproval. As a devotee of God, her behavior is far too familiar. Gilead watched Adele, surrounded by the knights. "She is rather frivolous," he conceded. "Have they all lost their minds?" Rebecca suggested. "Someone should keep an eye on her. For safety." She thought of Matar. Perhaps he could accompany her? "He's too indecisive." Gilead dismissed the idea. "What about the valiant Reynard?" They both looked over at Reynard, practically wagging his tail in Adele's presence. "Useless," they thought in unison. Every subsequent suggestion Rebecca made was met with Gilead's staunch refusal. Finally, he sighed dramatically. "There's no other way. I suppose I will have to monitor her." Rebecca was deeply touched. Gazing at his profile, she thought, "Oh my, such a dependable man." Blissfully unaware of this conversation, Adele frowned at a letter from home the next day. Her younger brother, Caden, hadn't received a letter from her in some time, and had apparently gone quite mad. He loved no one but his sister. He'd even blown up the bridge his father was due to cross, simply because his beloved sister had expressed a need. Even when debris from a rock slide had scarred his face, Caden's only thought had been, "Finally, it's over. I can go home to my sister." But when his attendant handed him the letter from home, bearing the family seal, Caden was displeased. "Why hasn't my sister written back?" His sharp mind noticed that the last 3 letters hadn't been in her hand. He began to worry. Has something happened to her? His attendant tried to reassure him. Perhaps the Lady Adele is simply busy. If anything were amiss, Master Gur would surely inform you. Caden didn't believe it. No, even if she were busy, she would write at least a few lines herself. She knows me too well. The unspoken end to that sentence was, and she knows I go mad without news of her. Unfortunately, Adele was indeed very busy. Busy trying to win over Caden's future brother-in-law. Since Gilead had volunteered to monitor her, his first act was to reassign her duties. Dishwashing and peeling potatoes simply wouldn't do. He carefully selected a new task, childcare. It would limit her contact with the other knights, and it was relatively undemanding. He'd overlooked one crucial detail, however. Children sent to the church tended to be a bit mischievous. One boy, in particular, the only son of an earl, whose mother was a fortunate, was especially unruly. He pointed at Adele and yelled, "Why should I listen to you?" Adele's expression hardened. "Don't point at me, or I'll break your finger." The boy, still a child at heart, was instantly cowed. He wasn't inherently bad, just spoiled. Watching him scamper away, Adele thought of Caden. I wonder how he's doing. The man was an icy, handsome figure, doted upon by all. Yet, he showed no interest in women. Then a woman, whose smile could bewitch, appeared and shattered all his principles. Gilead disliked noisy environments. When Adele brought the children to observe the knight's training, Gilead, initially intending to send them away, stopped himself. "It's quite all right," he said. "I don't mind." To encourage the troublesome boy to focus, Adele cleverly respun his reputation from genius to mischievous scamp. When the child questioned this, Gilead, surprisingly, played along with Adele's fabrication. Even during prayer, he deliberately chose a spot beside her. "Is this seat taken?" he asked. Adele, however, kept her distance. Rebecca, after all, was watching them like a hawk. The moment he sat down, Adele said, "I know you despise me. That's why you assigned me to childcare, isn't it?" Gilead felt a pang of injustice. He genuinely thought it was an easy task. This time, however, he answered honestly, "I didn't send you there because—" He trailed off, interrupted by Rebecca, who called upon Adele from the pulpit to lead the reading, even specifying the chapter. Adele, outwardly serene, inwardly panicked. How does it go again? Come on, think. Then, a low voice beside her said, "If you were to show your true face again, someone would surely fall in love with you." Gilead had appeared at her side, seemingly out of nowhere, subtly shielding her, just as the ice between them seemed to be thawing. A letter arrived from the archbishop, announcing his arrival at the church in 2 days. Unlike his initial anticipation, a wave of disappointment washed over Gilead. Matar, watching the children play outside, remarked, "Their joy won't last long. Lady Adele will be returning to her estate soon." Gilead was jolted back to reality. He'd almost forgotten Adele's purpose here, to find a husband. Matar continued, oblivious. Reynard has been hovering around Lady Adele constantly. He's clearly trying to win her favor. Gilead shot to his feet and rushed outside. Sure enough, there they were on the training grounds, laughing together. Seeing Adele smile at another man filled him with an inexplicable irritation. Learning that Reynard was attempting to impress her with a swordsmanship demonstration, Gilead, with a flick of his wrist, felled a nearby tree. Amidst the swirling dust, his expression impassive, he asked, "Is this the kind of demonstration you mean?" He then proceeded to lecture Reynard. "If you're going to demonstrate, do it properly. Show some respect for those who trust you and give you opportunities." Reynard, thoroughly upstaged, was mortified. Just then, the children swarmed him, calling him away. When only Gilead and Adele remained, he turned his attention back to her. "As the heir to a merchant company, you should be more discerning in your judgment. Reynard is hardly suitable to instruct children in training." Adele, bewildered, opened her mouth to reply, but a sudden gust of wind whipped through, disheveling her hair. Gilead immediately shifted his position, blocking the wind and standing before her, a melancholic expression on his face. Finally, he said, "I assigned you to that task, not because I dislike you." He paused, then added almost inaudibly, "It's quite the opposite, actually." Adele, with her sharp wit and keen observation, understood. That simple explanation, coupled with his earlier attempt to sit beside her during prayer, revealed a subtle shift in his feelings towards her. His words confirmed her suspicion. She was close to capturing Gilead's heart, just one spark away from igniting the flame. While preparing for dinner, Adele noticed something peculiar. Her merchant company had donated a substantial sum to the church. Yet everyone seemed to subsist on a monotonous diet of potatoes, and poor quality ones at that. That evening, she and her maid devised a plan, splitting up to pursue separate tasks. Adele instructed her maid to seek out a particular person, while she herself went to confront Rebecca about the subpar food. Rebecca bristled. "Are you accusing me of embezzling church funds? This is slander. To win a man's heart," she thought. She'd even offer herself as a monster's dinner. Only then would he feel guilty, and his feelings for her would deepen. After all, penniless and cast out, only to be discovered later as a misunderstanding. Even the coldest heart would melt. Adele had orchestrated the entire scenario. She'd sent her maid to find Mitar, the incorruptible captain, while she approached Rebecca, pointing out the discrepancy between the church's expenses and the quality of the food, insisting they confront the supplier together. In truth, Adele trusted Rebecca's character. While Rebecca was known to hold a grudge, she would never do anything to harm the church. Adele suspected the supplier was the culprit. As expected, everything unfolded according to her plan. Even the supplier's inability to immediately repay the embezzled funds was anticipated. Adele produced a wad of cash. "Consider this alone," she said, "but from tomorrow onwards I expect proper provisions." This entire exchange was witnessed by Mitar just as Adele had planned. The next day, as everyone marveled at the sudden improvement in their meals, Mitar sought out Gilead. "There's something concerning Lady Adele," he began, "that I feel compelled to report." Subsequently, Gilead summoned Adele, his tone laced with suspicion. "Where were you last night?" he asked. "And what were you doing?" According to Adele's script, Gilead should now believe she had bribed the supplier to improve the quality of the food. All she had to do was remain silent, then feign disappointment. "If you don't trust me," she would say, "then anything I say is pointless. In that case, I'll simply leave. Congratulations, your life can return to its peaceful state." With that, she would turn to go. Gilead's hand hovered, reaching out as if to stop her. He had abandoned everything, desiring only the life of a holy knight. But Adele's arrival had shattered his ascetic tranquility. "Lady Adele, please wait." Hearing his plea, she turned back, feigning surprise. "He's finally here," she thought, though a little later than expected. She deliberately angled her face to showcase her more attractive left side. "Are you looking for me?" she asked. "Did Rebecca say something?" "I told her repeatedly." In her carefully constructed plan, after Gilead dismissed her, Rebecca, upon learning the truth, would feel indebted to Adele and would reveal everything to Gilead. Then, knowing the full story, Gilead, out of guilt or a sense of responsibility, would surely come after her. This tactic of strategic retreat, of manufactured misunderstandings to escalate emotions, was a game she played with masterful finesse. But for a fleeting moment, doubt flickered within her. What if he actually takes my hand? What then? But he'd miscalculated. She hadn't waited to hear him out. Whatever he said wouldn't change the facts. "I've come to bring you back," Gilead declared, "and I'm not asking anyone's permission." Adele froze, utterly bewildered. Unbeknownst to her, after she'd left, the bishop had returned to the church. After briefly assessing the bribery incident, he requested a private conversation with Gilead, a seasoned observer of matters of the heart. The bishop instantly recognized the young knight's lovesick days. He subtly prodded and provoked, hoping to illuminate the truth for the naive young man, that a certain young woman had already taken root in his heart. Realizing the bishop's implication, Gilead abruptly excused himself. Perhaps from the very first moment he'd met Adele, she had captivated him. But burdened by duty, he had chosen to ignore his burgeoning feelings. Now, faced with the prospect of losing her, he couldn't bear it. In truth, Rebecca had sought him out before he left, explaining the misunderstanding surrounding Adele. But he hadn't listened, rushing off to pursue her instead. And now, to her feigned attempt to leave, he offered a perfectly crafted explanation. "How could you just leave like that?" he asked. "Have you forgotten our promise to marry, to secure her inheritance and become a wealthy woman?" Adele had chased him relentlessly for 3 blocks, begging him to marry her. Initially, he'd refused, but after she'd left, regret had gnawed at him. It seemed his unromantic heart had already been captured by this cunning, mischievous woman. "Now that I'm holding your hand," he said, his voice earnest, "let me stay by your side forever." Such a straightforward declaration of love almost made Adele laugh. After all her painstaking efforts, she'd finally won him over. But she covered her mouth, stifling her amusement. She couldn't appear too eager. Noticing her subtle shift in expression, Gilead murmured, "It's all right. You can smile. You should be happy. After all," he continued, "you said this marriage would change your life. If you didn't smile, I would be disappointed." This unexpected tenderness from the usually stoic knight was almost too much for Adele to bear. To change the subject, she showed him the small fox she'd found. Upon seeing the creature, Gilead's hand instinctively went to the sword at his hip. Sensing the danger, Adele quickly clutched the fox protectively. "You can't hurt it." Gilead hesitated. He wanted to warn her of the potential danger. But seeing her affection for the creature, he swallowed his words. He would protect her. He would protect them both. They returned to the church, where, after meeting with the bishop, they could finally return home to their families and hold their engagement ceremony. Here, it's worth noting Gilead's subtle maneuvering. Upon seeing the bishop, he immediately knelt. "I hope you will bless our union," he declared. Unlike Adele's plan for a later engagement, Gilead intended to bring his parents there that very day, to be married under the watchful eye of God, and pledge their lifelong devotion to each other. The bishop, deeply impressed, told Adele, "Now that you've decided to join hands, there's no turning back. Marriage is sacred," he continued. "No matter what difficulties or unexpected events you face, you must learn to endure." Adele found his words unsettling. They felt like a veiled warning. Was there something wrong with Gilead? But that couldn't be. She'd personally confirmed his status and impeccable character. Surely he wasn't incapable in some way? The thought flitted uncomfortably across her mind. And teach her younger brother to love his older sister. But the older sister is going to marry another man. This line appears unrelated and may be a misplaced subtitle. Gilead, taking her hand, swore an oath before God. "If either of us should violate this sacred union," he declared, "I will pay with my life." Adele felt a jolt of surprise. In her mind, their marriage was a mutually beneficial arrangement. Why was he staking his life on it? She stood beside him, speechless. After Gilead finished his oath, he gently helped her to her feet. The bishop, his gaze piercing, asked if she had anything to add to the vow. Realizing she couldn't remain silent, Adele, invoking her family name, promised, "No matter what happens, I will ensure that this noble commander has everything he desires for the rest of his life, and I will never let him suffer." Observing this exchange, one could only marvel at their cunning. Adele had skillfully maneuvered Gilead into marriage, while he, in turn, had bound her with a life-or-death vow. Once outside, Adele voiced her frustration. How could the bishop spring that on us without warning? Gilead leaned in, asking, "What do you mean?" Startled by his sudden proximity, Adele quickly stepped back. "I was just taken aback by the seriousness of the oath," she explained. Her unspoken concern was the gravity of such a vow. Such oaths are dangerous, she thought. This could lead to serious problems. Gilead then went to bid farewell to the bishop, leaving Adele to wait for him in the carriage. As soon as Gilead entered, the bishop asked, "Are you pleased with my gift?" His implication was clear. "I orchestrated that oath to prevent that cunning woman from changing her mind. You should be thanking me." The oath was a double-edged sword, a blessing or a curse, depending on whether. They honored their lifelong commitment. But the bishop also wanted to warn Gilead. Their marriage would soon become known to the royal family. Gilead seemed unconcerned. He didn't care. But the bishop's point was, what if Adele found out? What if she discovered his true identity as the lost prince? When everyone saw the little fox, they all said he was a handsome, abstinent older brother. This line appears out of place and may be a misplaced subtitle. In reality, he's quite passionate. He could kiss you breathless. This also appears out of place. Once he sets his sights on a woman, he never lets go. This too seems misplaced. But Adele still naively believed their relationship was purely transactional. She attributed his willingness to marry her to her clever maneuvering. So, on the journey home, cuddling the small fox, she decided to coach Gilead on proper etiquette. Once they descended the mountain and arrived at her estate, she worried Gilead wouldn't know how to behave in front of her father. Although Gilead possessed a noble air and held the prestigious position of commander of the knights, she still feared he might be underestimated. But becoming her husband wouldn't be easy. Her considerable wealth meant anyone pursuing her would be suspected of being a fortune hunter, showing her a lack of respect. And her father wasn't easily fooled. Just then, the small fox poked its head out from her arms. "Are you always this fond of small animals?" Gilead asked curiously. Not usually, Adele replied, but I don't know why. I just can't bring myself to leave this little one behind. A previous hint suggested this fox was more than it seemed. In reality, it was a person under a spell and held something Gilead had long sought. Suddenly, Adele realized the fox didn't have a name. Banlu, Gilead suggested without hesitation. Adele thought the name, which sounded like spotted deer, was rather uninspired, but she nonetheless picked up the little fox, murmuring, Banlu, Banlu. As she gazed into the fox's eyes, she felt as though she were on the verge of seeing something. Suddenly, Gilead took the fox from her. You'll spoil him if you hold him constantly. Discipline is important, especially in the beginning. It seems I'll be in charge of raising our children, too. Adele blushed at his words. They soon reached the city, and her family estate was just moments away. Adele pinned up her hair and extended her hand. Now, let me show you my battlefield. Upon arriving home, her playful demeanor vanished. She immediately questioned the butler about household affairs, inquired about her father's return, and then, to the surprise of the staff, led Gilead to her room. It was Gilead's first visit to her home, and he was already in her bedroom. In public, he was the abstinent, uninterested in women holy knight. But in private, with Adele, he was surprisingly smooth. Are you really not interested in sweets? Adele asked. They're so fragrant and sweet. Just being near them can make one lose all reason. Gilead leaned closer. I'm very interested, he murmured. How could I dislike something so fragrant and sweet? His eyes were full of unspoken longing, but Adele, utterly oblivious, set down her teacup and gestured for him to come closer. Gilead paused. What are you doing? He asked. Adele explained that her father was a shrewd observer, and if they acted too distant as a couple, it would arouse suspicion. Before she could finish, Gilead moved closer. Like this. You can take my arm, he offered. Adele, pleased with his quick understanding, congratulated herself on choosing him. Gilead is handsome, honorable, intelligent, and considerate, she thought. Just then, a maid announced her father's arrival. Adele started to pull her arm away, but Gilead held on. There's no need to hide, he said. Remember, you're my fiancé now. His words made her heart skip a beat. He's right. He's supposed to be protecting me. Why am I panicking? She reminded him that her father was a formidable man. Before she could say anything more, the door burst open. Find a man who bombed the bridge, a voice roared. I'll tear him limb from limb. Hearing the voice, Adele quickly released Gilead's arm and turned to face the newcomer. Father, you're finally home. What kept you so late? Adele greeted him. The Count fumed. Some scoundrel blew up the bridge on my route. I'll have Caden stew the villain in a pot. Adele smiled, but remained silent. She couldn't very well have Caden stew her in a pot. Where's Gerald? Her father asked. He brought back a mountain of engagement gifts. He's just waiting to arrange the ceremony. Instead of Gerald, however, the Count found an unfamiliar face. Greetings, Count Sergio, Gilead said. The Count stared at Gilead for 3 long seconds. Though I know you take after me, I didn't expect you to stray so quickly. He'd taken only one look at Gilead and fallen captive to his handsome features, instantly forgiving his daughter's apparent infidelity. This man was clearly exceptional. I am Gilead, soon to be Lady Adele's first and last husband. The Count was bewildered. This wasn't the man his daughter had been with before he left. She'd switched fiancés? He didn't give Adele a chance to explain, immediately agreeing to the change. Adele couldn't believe her cunning. Profit-driven father had agreed so readily. Even after her father had left, she stood there, stunned. Gilead's voice brought her back to reality. The matter is settled. Let's have some tea. Since you and your father are so alike, and you fell for me at first sight, why wouldn't he? Perhaps he's quite pleased with me as a son-in-law. Adele was speechless. Well, yes, she stammered. Gilead then voiced his confusion. What did your father mean by straying? Adele quickly clarified. I despise infidelity. Marriage is a lifelong commitment, while romantic love is a foolish fantasy, and most prioritize career and family. I wouldn't consider divorce unless absolutely necessary. While he appreciated the first part of her statement, the word divorce stung Gilead. He masked his reaction. As long as you're not fickle, he said, his eyes gleaming. Because I am not. Adele's eyes, however, narrowed suspiciously. As the atmosphere grew tense, Gilead suddenly stood. Your father wishes to speak with me privately. Adele panicked. I'll go with you. I don't want him giving you a hard time. Gilead reassured her as he straightened her collar, his touch lingering. You look stunning in anything, he murmured, making her blush. She let him go, but the moment he left, she regretted it. Adele undid her updo. and asked a maid to fetch something. After her sister stole her fiancé, she needed a husband quickly to secure her position as heir. She hadn't expected to snag such a prize. Outwardly abstinent and aloof, he was secretly cunning and flirtatious, easily charming even her shrewd father. But the Count, though seemingly smitten, had his own reasons. Sitting with someone as handsome as you, he began. Sitting with someone as handsome as you, Count Sergio mused, reminds me of a legend. There was once a young lady from a northern family, with hair like spun moonlight, so beautiful even the emperor fell in love with her at first sight. He turned to Gilead. That young lady, much like yourself, shared the surname Sadian. The Count's meaning was clear. I know your true identity. There's no need for pretense. He had only one question. Why? Gilead, a man of your detachment, are you interested in my daughter? What's your purpose? Gilead didn't hesitate. Because Adele is worthy. The simple words struck a chord with the Count. No matter who his daughter brought home, he wouldn't be completely satisfied, even if it were the future emperor himself. He'd agreed to the marriage because he doubted anyone would truly meet his standards. Better to choose someone who genuinely cared for Adele. But he also knew the risks she'd face with Gilead. For your safety, he said, I'll create a false identity for you. Gilead was puzzled. But wouldn't that be a loss? You won't gain any connection to the royal family, nor any significant power. A loss. The Count chuckled. He never made unprofitable deals. Ensuring his daughter's happiness was a worthwhile investment. But Gilead pressed, do you want Adele to be the most esteemed woman in the empire? If I said yes, what would you do? Before Gilead could answer, a figure appeared in the doorway. He froze. Adele, in a crimson gown, stood before him like a blooming rose. His composure wavered. The stoic prince, confronted by a captivating rose, lost his carefully constructed calm. The Count observed Gilead's reaction, finding his answer. He could trust this man with his daughter. Adele, unaware of the effect her dress had, assumed Gilead was drunk. Father, you can't just ply someone with strong liquor on their first meeting. The Count, unfazed, invited her to join them in savoring the fragrant wine. As the liquid flowed down her throat, Adele gasped. This is incredible. We should sign an exclusive distribution contract. She underestimated her father. Why bother with a contract? Just buy the vineyard outright. Adele laughed. That was her father. She poured another glass as the Count warned. This wine, deceptively sweet, can steal your senses before you know it. His warning came too late. Halfway through her fifth glass, Adele felt a pleasant haze. Gilead abruptly took her glass. No more for you. He finished the remaining wine himself. Adele blushed as she watched his lips touch the same rim hers had. She realized her father had slipped away unnoticed. Probably couldn't stand the lovey-dovey atmosphere, she thought. They were alone for barely a minute before. Oh my goodness, sister, you're back. Adele plastered a smile on her face, inwardly cursing. Of all the times, now she runs into Noella. The girl's faux concern made Adele want to gag. Worse, she worried Gilead might fall for Noella's angelic facade. He couldn't possibly see the machinations churning beneath that sweet smile. Little did she know, Gilead saw Noella as nothing more than background noise. He was far more interested in the man beside her. Probably one of Adele's former suitors, he thought, a flicker of jealousy sparking within him. So, when he introduced himself, he made sure to emphasize his current status. Gilead, Adele's fiancé. The announcement stunned both Noella and her companion. That's impossible, Noella exclaimed. Sister, you never told me, Adele retorted. I never heard about your relationship with Jeruz either. Noella, who had been secretly involved with Adele's previous fiancé, couldn't accept Adele finding a new husband so quickly. Resorting to her usual tactics, she tried to drive a wedge between Adele and Gilead. She insinuated Adele was rushing into marriage out of desperation, not love. Then she subtly implied Gilead was a man of poor character, unworthy of trust. Finally, she positioned herself as the peacemaker, claiming concern for Adele's well-being. A perfect escape. But Adele saw right through her little charade. Yes, Adele admitted, I am eager to marry. But poor character is an understatement. He's malicious, ruthless. He wouldn't hesitate to spill blood if someone crossed him. Noella was taken aback by her sister's words. Truthfully, Adele was barely holding it together. The alcohol was starting to cloud her mind. Noella, sensing Adele's weakening state, pounced. Sister, you're just drowning your sorrows, she crooned. This marriage is just an impulsive reaction to heartbreak. Adele tried to retort. but she was about to collapse. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tension. "Don't worry, my fiancé isn't impulsive. I am." Gilead slipped his arm around Adele's waist, providing a convenient excuse for her inebriated state. "She had a little too much to drink, because I was here." Ignoring the shocked expressions, he swept Adele into his arms. "Let's go back to our room." Nestled against his broad chest, Adele felt like a purring kitten, content to let him lead her away. Later, she thanked him for saving her from both a physical fall and social embarrassment. She assumed he'd been playing along to help her save face. Gilead frowned. He meant every word. "Well, regardless," he said, "don't drink so much next time, Adele. It's dangerous." He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. He heard Adele murmur, "I couldn't let you drink all that alone. You're my man after all." The alcohol had loosened her tongue. She knew it was a bold statement, but a part of her was curious to see his reaction. Gilead turned back, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. His wife was drunk. Gilead fought the urge to take advantage of the situation. But then, under the hazy moonlight, she leaned in. A soft, tender kiss. The feeling sent a jolt of electricity through Adele. My, Commander, are we impulsive?" she thought. Gilead traced his thumb across her lips, a knowing look in his eyes. "No," he murmured, "I've never been more rational." They lingered in each other's arms for a long while. In stark contrast to their thin sweetness, Noella was in a state of panic. She was convinced Adele had misunderstood her intentions, believing she was after the family fortune. That's why, Noella reasoned, Adele had rushed into this sham marriage with some unknown actor, likely a gold-digging charlatan. She'd badgered Jeruz, urging him to help her expose the cracks in Adele's fabricated romance. The next morning, Adele was still reliving the previous night's kiss. "That was close," she thought. "We almost lost control." Learning that Gilead had gone hunting with her father at the crack of dawn, she had her maid prepare her, eager to greet them upon their return. But the moment she saw him, her cheeks flushed, her heart pounded. Images of their intimate moment flooded her mind. Gilead, however, seemed preoccupied. Her father had tricked him, lured him into a gleeful slaughter before informing him that Adele detested the smell of blood in the morning. Adhering to the principle of reciprocity, and not wanting to be on the receiving end of Adele's displeasure, Gilead explained, "I'm not happy because I saw blood so early in the morning. But as long as Uncle is happy," he neatly shifted the blame to the Count. Just then, Noella and Jeruz arrived, requesting to join them for breakfast. Before they could even begin, Jeruz abruptly announced his intention to hold an early engagement ceremony with Noella. Adele stared at them, speechless. These two are determined to antagonize me, she thought. Coincidentally, she and Gilead had been about to bring up the same topic. Her father, eyes narrowed, settled in for the show. After the initial shock, Jeruz began desperately trying to prove his sincerity, only to earn the Count's disapproval. "Jeruz, no matter how capable you are, you can't confess your love to my eldest daughter, and then get together with my youngest. If you insist on this, then wait for my son, Caden, to return." The man who had just proposed to Adele's sister, after confessing to Adele, found himself facing the wrath of his future father-in-law. "Since my family's bloodline is so appealing to you, wait for my son. Perhaps you'll find him to your liking as well." But Caden's bloodthirsty and brutal nature was notorious. Jeruz instantly recoiled. The Count, losing his appetite, stood to leave. Everyone assumed the proposal was on hold. "Uncle," Gilead spoke up, "you haven't given me your answer yet." Adele panicked. This blockhead, always so eager for this, she thought. The Count chuckled, prompting Gilead for a valid reason. Gilead's response stunned everyone. "Your daughter has done things that require her to take responsibility for me, using marriage as a pretext." He continued, "She has repeatedly coveted my body and soul." The Count's face darkened. After all, this man before him was a figure of considerable importance. How dare anyone disrespect him? But then it hit him. Wait a minute, that's my daughter. Seeing the Count waver, Gilead pressed his advantage. Knowing the Sergio family prized honor and responsibility above all else, he played to that strength. He beseeched Adele to take responsibility for him, and quickly. Adele opened her mouth to protest, but her father cut her off, launching into a fatherly lecture about the consequences of indulgence. And so, on the spot, he declared that their engagement ceremony would be held that very evening, the wedding 3 days later. While her goal was achieved, Adele felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. So this is how rumors start, she thought. They'd shared a kiss, nothing more. Yet Gilead was fixated on the idea that, given the current state of their relationship, Adele should no longer address him as commander, but by his name. He made her feel as though she'd committed some grave offense. One thing continued to puzzle her. Why was Gilead so insistent on marrying her? It didn't seem particularly advantageous for him. Before she could dwell on it further, she was almost captivated by his devastatingly handsome face. Flustered, she quickly changed the subject, mentioning the wedding invitations. She wondered, given the magnitude of the event, why Gilead had never mentioned his parents. The question seemed to momentarily stun him. He then offered a curt explanation. His parents were gone, his siblings inconsequential. Everyone, he added, had their burdens. Clearly, he wanted to discourage further inquiry. His words stung. The fiery heiress finally melted the heart of the icy paladin, she thought bitterly, only to discover it was all a delusion. She had laid bare her heart, shown her true self, while he calculated and held back. Disappointment settled over Adele. This is a contract, nothing more. I overstepped. Seeing her distress, Gilead panicked. He reached for her hand, asking for time. Adele pulled away. Explanations weren't what they needed. Time apart was. Besides, she had to prepare for the evening's festivities. As she turned to leave, he stepped close. His voice a low murmur against her ear. 3 days, he whispered, and you'll understand who benefits most from this. His cryptic words hung in the air as they went their separate ways. To Adele's surprise, a mere engagement dinner proved to be far more extravagant than she could have imagined. The ballroom glittered with crystal statues. Having spent time at the temple, her first thought was what a waste. She clasped her hands together, silently praying for the gods to forgive her father's extravagance. A light-hearted banter had begun between father and daughter, the atmosphere warm and jovial. When her cousin arrived, a shadow falling over the scene. He was all polite deference on the surface, but Adele recognized the cunning beneath. He was still a boy to her, easily managed. Normally, she would have handled such situations with practiced ease. But today, an unusual weariness weighed her down. Her father, noticing her fatigue, asked tentatively, "What would you do if I told you there was no need to live life so burdened?" His words ignited a spark within her. She had weathered countless storms, driven by a single goal, to inherit the family business. Was he suggesting she abandon it? The business was more precious to her than life itself. She would never let it go. Even as she said the words, Adele's thoughts drifted to Gilead. Tonight's guests were all from her side of the family. He was utterly alone. Could he be feeling out of place? Her father, sensing her shift in mood, teased, "What? Is there something besides the family business that matters to you now? Are you worried about him?" Adele was about to retort when, as if on cue, Gilead made his grand entrance, radiating an almost otherworldly charisma. The men stared in open admiration, while the women practically swooned. Several matrons even approached Adele, eager to learn her husband's snatching secrets. The whispers followed her, the heiress reduced to a lovesick fool, washing 9,999 dishes to win her man. When her nosy relatives pressed for details, Adele simply offered a cryptic smile. It was divine guidance, she demurred. She didn't mind the gossip. Maintaining the family's image was paramount. But her relatives were relentless. Just as their questions reached a fever pitch, Gilead stepped in, rescuing his bride-to-be. Adele, he declared, his voice carrying across the room, worked diligently at the temple. She was humble, tireless, and never complained. How could I not fall in love with such a woman? He took her hand, gazing into her eyes with an intensity that sparked envious sighs from the onlookers. But then came the inevitable follow-up question. And what does Miss Adele see in the commander? Gilead, who moments before had been her staunch defender, fell silent, his gaze fixed on Adele, awaiting her response. Just then, her cousin, Mauld, seized the opportunity to stir up trouble. Using his apparent drunkenness as a shield, he sneered at Adele. Someone as materialistic as her? Fall in love with a man who has nothing but a pretty face. Noella interjected, urging Mauld to stop his drunken ramblings. He rounded on her, spitting back. If Adele wasn't so greedy, so obsessed with control, she'd be much better off. The two of them, working in tandem, were clearly trying to humiliate her. A slow smile spread across Adele's face. "Let's not forget," she began, her voice dripping with ice, "that the combined assets of everyone in this room wouldn't equal my allowance. You have no right to discuss me or my fiancé." she continued, her gaze fixed on Maud. The very hotel and clothing stores you now manage were gifts from me. You ungrateful wretch. If you want to be heartless, don't expect me to be merciful. Feigning distress, Adele turned to her father. Father, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I'd like an additional engagement gift. I want what is rightfully mine. Maud's composure shattered. He lunged towards her, only to be dragged out of the ballroom by the guards. The room, which moments before had been buzzing with malicious whispers, fell silent. Those who had been watching this spectacle unfold now rushed to offer their fawning congratulations. Adele ignored them. Let that be a lesson to all of you, she warned, her voice cold and sharp. There are consequences for those who overstep. Despite her outward display of strength, Adele was emotionally and physically drained. She excused herself, seeking refuge in the quiet solitude of the courtyard. The memory of Maud's disrespect towards Gilead fueled her anger. She wanted to hurt him badly. Unbeknownst to her, Gilead had followed, overhearing her dark thoughts. The once icy knight was now a man hopelessly devoted to his wife, clinging to her every word. Seeing Gilead rushing towards her, his hair disheveled, a stark contrast to his usual impeccable appearance, Adele knew he was worried. Yet a strange pang of disappointment resonated within her. If only they were closer, she could have reached out and smoothed his hair back. And then another thought struck her. The memory of her sharp words to Maud, the dark thought of wanting him dead, and the realization that Gilead had witnessed it all, filled Adele with a fresh wave of despair. You must be so disappointed in me, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Gilead looked at her, genuinely puzzled. Why would I be? He started it. He continued, his brow furrowed in confusion. If you had just stood there and taken his abuse, that would have disappointed me. Besides, he added, a dangerous glint in his eye. If it were me, I wouldn't just kill him. I'd skin him alive from head to toe, he said with a chillingly casual tone, or maybe strap him to a bomb. A laugh escaped Adele's lips, the tension easing slightly. In that moment, a question she hadn't realized she was asking herself was answered. She knew what she loved about him. Her fingers gently traced the line of his jaw. I love this about you, she whispered, that no matter what, you don't judge me. You always come to me, unwavering, she added silently, the words echoing in her heart. Gilead, sensing the depth of her unspoken affection, felt a surge of emotion. He captured her hand, his voice husky. Say my name, he commanded, his eyes burning with intensity. Adele's gaze softened, a blush creeping up her cheeks as his face drew closer. Just then, Caden, her volatile younger brother, appeared, his face a mask of thunder. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. Ignoring Adele's protests, he drew his sword, ready to defend her from the man he perceived as assaulting her. Caden, stop. It's not what you think. He's my husband, your brother-in-law. The word husband only seemed to enrage him further. With a roar, Caden launched himself at Gilead, his sword flashing in a blur of motion. He moved with lightning speed, his attack a whirlwind of steel. Gilead moved. Adele screamed, but to her astonishment, he stood his ground. He parried every blow, his movements effortless and precise. When Caden attacked again, Gilead snapped his sword in two with a single, swift movement. Undeterred, Caden drew a dagger, his eyes blazing with fury. Adele had seen enough. She slapped Caden hard across the face. Caden, consumed by his obsessive love for his sister, had been ready to kill his future brother-in-law. Now, she had struck him, defending this man. Sister, how could you? He cried, his voice filled with disbelief and hurt. Adele's anger flared. Because of you, she hissed, I almost became a widow on my engagement day. She had allowed him to practice with a sword so he could protect himself, eliminate threats. But Gilead was no threat. If you ever behave like this again, she warned, her voice trembling with rage, I will never forgive you. I will never see you again. Leaving her heartbroken brother behind, Adele took Gilead's arm and turned to leave. Just then, the Count, searching for them, stumbled upon the awkward scene. Caden, you little rascal, you actually showed your face here, he boomed, oblivious to the tension still hanging in the air. Father and son erupted into a loud, undignified argument. Adele watched, a mixture of exasperation and bewilderment swirling within her. She had anticipated Caden's outburst and had taken precautions. When Caden had blown up the bridge on his father's route home, She had given him a new order: rebuild it. He shouldn't even be here. Suddenly, her gaze shifted to Noella, who had arrived close behind her father. "Sister, are you all right? Did I do something wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with feigned concern. Suddenly, it clicked. Noella. It had to be her. That explained why she was so dressed up for the engagement dinner. She'd probably been hoping for a spectacular meltdown. Adele's suspicions were confirmed a few days later, when the messenger hawk was found, barely clinging to life. As always, Noella preempted any accusations with a theatrical performance of innocence. Rushing to Adele, she cried, "Sister, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to bring Caden here as a surprise. Was I wrong to do that?" Gilead, who had witnessed the near-fatal duel, looked utterly bewildered by this new drama. Adele couldn't help but laugh. Gilead had been startled, but not by Caden. He was surprised by the intensity of his own protective instincts. "It's fine," he said, turning to Noella. "But next time, perhaps I should arrange for Caden to make an appearance at your engagement," he suggested, a hint of steel in his voice. "Imagine the scene," he mused. The sister who stole her sister's former fiancé, now disrupting her engagement to her current one. He paused, observing Noella's reaction. And yet, he continued, her sister isn't angry. She's actually concerned for her. He looked directly at Noella. "What is it you truly desire?" he asked. "Perhaps I can have it delivered as a gift for your engagement." Adele's unexpected generosity stunned Noella into silence for a moment. Then, her practiced smile returned. "Sister, you've already given me everything," she murmured. "What more could I possibly want?" Despite her words, she looked anything but happy. Adele, sensing her sister's true feelings, added gently, "Jeruz would be saddened to see you like this." The gentle words, like a carefully placed knife, hit their mark. Noella, uncharacteristically silent, managed a strained smile before slipping from the room. Adele watched her go, a thoughtful expression on her face. Gilead and she did seem like a genuine couple. Perhaps even Gilead himself hadn't realized it yet. There was a flicker of envy in Noella's eyes. Adele, noticing this, and remembering Noella's limited time, felt a pang of pity. It wasn't worth the effort to confront her directly. Her more immediate concern was Caden. His outburst had infuriated their father. She worried they might try to kill each other under the guise of a hunting trip. So, she asked Gilead to accompany them. As it turned out, her father was called away on business, and despite being explicitly forbidden from joining them, Caden couldn't bear the thought of his sister marrying this stranger. And what kind of man came hunting and just stood around observing? To make matters worse, Gilead calmly deflected every one of Caden's taunts and insults. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife when Adele arrived, instantly extinguishing their simmering animosity. But Caden, covered in blood, was clearly frustrated at having missed the opportunity to help his sister dismount. However, when Adele noticed the lifeless body of Lily, her prized mare, lying on the ground, Caden puffed up with pride. "A gift for you, sister," he announced, looking like a cat that had just caught a particularly large mouse. Adele sighed inwardly. This was all her fault. Years ago, after Caden had been bullied, she had encouraged him to stand up for himself, to become self-reliant. She had even rewarded him whenever he fought back against his tormentors. Now, he was vying for her attention, competing with her fiancé. He glared at Gilead, ready to start another fight. But Gilead's next words defused the situation before it could escalate. When Adele suggested she and Caden needed to talk privately, Gilead readily agreed. But before he left, he deliberately emphasized their sibling bond, which further infuriated Caden. Once Gilead was out of earshot, Caden unleashed a torrent of Boumon at his sister. He understood her eagerness to marry. It was a strategic move to checkmate Noella's ambitions to usurp their family's position. That much he could grasp. What he couldn't understand was why she seemed to genuinely like the man. That was unacceptable. Adele's expression hardened. Caden had caused a scene at her engagement dinner, and she hadn't even reprimanded him yet. Now he dared to insult Gilead? "Enough," she said, her voice dangerously low. "And let this be the last time you ever speak of my husband with such disrespect." The warning delivered, Adele's demeanor softened. She gently wiped the blood from Caden's face, explaining her reasons for choosing Gilead. "He has given me so much," she said softly. "He's shown me that there are things in this world more precious than money. So please," she pleaded, "no more of this." But Caden remained unconvinced. Seeing his stubbornness, Adele threatened to make him her best man, a prospect so horrifying that he finally fell silent. Judging it was getting late, Adele prepared to return home with the two men. To appease her brother, she feigned a thoughtful expression. "Now, what should I do with the gift you gave me?" she mused aloud. Caden, easily swayed, brightened considerably. Just then, Gilead returned, his immaculate appearance a stark contrast to Caden's blood-splattered state. Despite his sister's recent lecture, Caden couldn't resist another snide remark directed at his future brother-in-law. Exasperated, Adele grabbed Gilead's arm and turned to leave. Suddenly, a small squirrel peeked out from Gilead's sleeve. Its adorable appearance instantly charmed Caden. His earlier animosity vanished, replaced by delight. Gilead had won this round effortlessly, leaving Caden utterly speechless with a mixture of frustration and awe. His suspicions deepened. Just who was this man? Not only did their father treat him with respect and confide in him, but Adele also dropped her usual guarded facade and smiled freely in his presence. Caden decided he couldn't let this go. He had to uncover Gilead's true identity. Even if Adele discovered his investigation and punished him, it would be better than watching her smile so unguardedly at such a suspicious character. Meanwhile, in the capital city, the second prince anxiously searched for his long-lost elder brother. His sister was getting married, and the groom wasn't him. This fueled the second prince's possessive, almost Yandere-like tendencies, igniting a desire to eliminate his sister's fiancé. He was unaware that the seemingly unremarkable man was, in fact, the esteemed crown prince of the empire. The fact that the crown prince had seemingly abandoned his wealth, reputation, and power to become engaged to the daughter of a wealthy merchant struck the second prince as utterly preposterous. The woman beside him, however, disagreed. With the emperor's health deteriorating and the crown prince's whereabouts unknown, she pointed out, countless eyes are vying for the throne. Even if it's just a rumor, we can't afford to miss any opportunity to locate the crown prince. With that, she volunteered. "Allow me to confirm the truth for you. One might be curious about her identity. She was Chloe, the original female protagonist of the novel, a woman who had risen from the overlooked position of a duke's adopted daughter to become the queen of society through her beauty and cunning. However, her offer to assist the second prince masked her own ulterior motives. Over the past 2 days, Adele's wedding day had finally arrived. The entire Count's household was in a flurry of activity. To prevent any further disruptions from her brother, Adele had specifically requested her father to confine him. Amidst the chaos, she'd also taken the time to select the perfect gift for Gilead. But Adele's brief moment of contentment was shattered when a maid arrived with news. First, the maid informed her that the Count had, in his exuberance, constructed a shrine for the wedding. Then, stammering, she delivered the second blow. Caden had escaped. Adele could just about handle the news of the shrine. But the second announcement, the escape, shattered her carefully constructed composure. The elegant, serene bride she'd envisioned herself to be vanished in a flash of anger. Slapping on a pair of iron handcuffs, she set off to hunt down her rebellious brother. And where had the runaway Caden gone? Straight to his future brother-in-law, of course. He still didn't believe Gilead's affections were genuine, and he intended to deliver a warning. "If you ever hurt my sister," he seethed, "I'll tear you apart." To emphasize his point, he made a threatening gesture, just to make sure Gilead understood he wasn't joking. At that moment, Adele's voice called out from beyond the door. Caden froze, instantly silent. As he frantically tried to figure out what to do, Gilead calmly loosened his neatly arranged collar. The younger brother wanted to punch his future brother-in-law, and Adele wanted to throttle her brother. But then, in a surprising twist, Gilead seemingly offered himself up as a sacrifice, just as Adele was about to burst into the room. To apprehend the fugitive Caden, Gilead appeared before her, his shirt unbuttoned, revealing his chest. The furious woman instantly transformed into a docile lamb, her eyes darting nervously, unsure where to look. Noticing the iron handcuffs on her wrist, Gilead raised an eyebrow. Adele stammered an explanation about intending to use them on her brother, but it seemed he wasn't there after all. Gilead solicitously offered to remove the cuffs, suggesting she perhaps not wear them in the future. Not because they clashed with her dress, but because he suspected they wouldn't be particularly effective as a weapon. Internally, Caden thought, "You sly dog." Adele, however, was oblivious to the subtle interplay. The wedding was about to begin, and they needed to leave. But Gilead still had a small matter to attend to. Excusing himself to adjust his attire, he returned to the room. Caden seized the opportunity to slip away, but a small knife suddenly blocked his path. "Don't forget your belongings," Gilead said, his voice a blend of warning and possessive assertion. "I'll take care of my wife." Meanwhile, Adele stared at the shrine her father had erected, utterly speechless. His extravagance knew no bounds. This was excessive, even for him. However, the Count's over-the-top gesture was intended to create a familiar atmosphere for Gilead, to ease any potential awkwardness for him being alone in a new environment. Understanding her father's intentions, Adele let the matter drop. Upon seeing Gilead in his wedding attire, her heart fluttered. Sensing her father's attempt to usher her forward, she quickly took Gilead's arm, eliciting laughter from the onlookers. They murmured about how perfectly matched the couple appeared, but Adele's thoughts were troubled. After all, only she and Gilead knew the truth. This was a marriage of convenience. This was the outcome she desired, yet a strange sense of melancholy settled over her. Since the marriage had already received the Archbishop's blessing, no further ceremonies were required, and so they moved directly to the exchange of rings. However, just as the officiant was halfway through his lines, Gilead abruptly interrupted. Everyone present was taken aback. Adele, too, was puzzled. Was there something wrong with the ring he'd prepared for her? Then, Gilead uttered a cryptic phrase. "Didn't you say you wanted the son?" On her sister's wedding night, Noella had stealthily sought out her new brother-in-law. Previously, she had used underhanded tactics to steal Adele's former fiancé. Now, she intended to repeat her performance, driving a wedge between her sister and her current husband. If Adele misunderstood and flew into a rage, Noella's objective would be achieved. So, she began to subtly insinuate that Gilead was not only fickle in love, but also a shrewd and calculating businessman. She even fabricated stories about him, frequently meeting with other men in private. At this point, Gilead interrupted his sister-in-law. "Adele has mentioned you a few times, Noella." Noella's heart skipped a beat, but she still managed to think, "He probably didn't say anything good about me." Gilead, however, responded coldly, "I don't recall anything specific. Perhaps I'm simply not interested in you. Or perhaps," he continued, "when Adele speaks, my eyes and attention are solely on her. You, on the other hand, seem rather fixated on me, wife." Noella, her scheming exposed, flustered, dropped her handkerchief. Gilead, with a swift stroke of his knife, sliced it in two. It was both a reminder and a warning to cease her manipulative games. Just then, Adele arrived, sensing the tension in the air. "Did something happen?" she asked. Noella lied, claiming she had merely come to ask her brother-in-law for a favor. However, Adele, with a seemingly light-hearted remark, exposed Noella's true intentions. The newly married couple then left Noella fuming, preparing to depart together. But before leaving, Adele had one last thing to give her dear sister. She raised her hand high, as if about to bestow a blessing. But in the next moment, a black bird landed on Noella's shoulder. Noella's face paled. This was the bird she had previously arranged to have killed. The favor Adele had asked of Rebecca was to resurrect the small creature. Placing the black bird on her sister's shoulder, Adele said icily, "Take good care of her this time." Seeing the shock on Noella's face, Adele felt a surge of satisfaction, thinking she could finally get a good night's sleep. Gilead's voice startled her. It suddenly dawned on her, "Wait, we're married now. So does that mean?" By then, Gilead had already come up behind her, encircling her in his arms. Adele's heart pounded, but remembering their marriage was only a contract, she felt a surge of discomfort at their sudden intimacy. Gilead, however, looked at her earnestly. "Do you think you're the only one who doesn't let go of what you've captured?" On their wedding night, the husband wanted to be intimate with his wife, but she rejected him. After all, theirs was a marriage of convenience. Was it really necessary to take things this far? But in truth, Gilead genuinely loved Adele. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given her a fragment of the sun as a wedding gift. And in Gilead's eyes, no one was more deserving of the ring than Adele, because the only person with sufficient wealth to not sell it, but to cherish it always, was Adele. For the first time, Adele felt truly grateful for being born into a wealthy family. However, the fact that the Archbishop so readily parted with such a precious item suggested he truly favored Gilead. At this thought, Gilead's expression suddenly darkened. "It's not just because this was my mother's," Gilead said, his voice low. "More accurately, it's something that should have belonged to my mother, because the Archbishop was once her godfather, and perhaps he thought that I needed to give you such a fortunate gift to be worthy of you." Adele laughed. The idea that Gilead wasn't worthy of her. He was so perfect, Suddenly, something occurred to her. The only thing the esteemed commander seemed to lack was that. She remembered the night Adele had gotten drunk and passionately kissed Gilead. Yet nothing had happened, coupled with the rumors that the holy knights of the Grand Temple were devoid of such desires. Adele naturally assumed that Gilead was also incapable, but with his looks and physique, it felt greedy to ask for more. To alleviate her guilt, Adele asked, "Is there anything you desire, Gilead? Ik kan fulfill an wish." Gilead considered for a moment. "What I desire, you might find difficult." Adele scoffed internally. Did he underestimate her? Was there anything in this world she couldn't handle? Gilead then uttered a simple sentence. "What I need most right now is an heir." In reality, he was subtly expressing his desire for intimacy with his wife. But Adele, caught in a web of misunderstanding, was completely oblivious. After her initial shock, she declared resolutely that she would help him find medicine to cure his condition. But this matter absolutely couldn't reach her father or Caden, lest chaos erupt. Gilead was utterly bewildered. What was his wife talking about? Facing a family of eccentric villains, she desperately played the role of the wicked adopted daughter to survive. But she overdid it, accidentally becoming the family's beloved pet. Upon waking, she was warned to quickly learn the family rules if she wanted to live. The man before her, with his dark hair and eyes, looked exactly like her favorite character, Heron. He was the ruler of the Northern Beleta family, who adopted the protagonist, Viola. Gifted and intelligent, Viola eventually seized control of Beletu. But she wasn't happy, for in gaining Beletu, she lost everything else. The dreamer felt Viola's pain, fantasizing about giving everyone a happy ending. Looking at her small hands, she wondered, had she become Viola in her dream? She knew Heron adopted Viola because he recognized her potential as a brilliant assassin, someone who could also stimulate the growth of his direct relatives. Since it was a dream, she decided to be unrestrained. She suddenly called out to the man, smiling sweetly, "Are you my daddy now?" Hearing Heron's affirmation and remembering how Viola aimed to eliminate the direct descendants to take over, she only wanted to be his daughter, even in a dream. She wanted to help him achieve his goals. So, the girl boldly questioned, "I heard the Beleta family values rationality above all else. So why don't I have the right to choose my daddy?" Her assertiveness startled him. The butler beside them was displeased, his sharp gaze warning her not to speak out of turn. But she knew that compared to blind obedience, Heron preferred bold defiance. With her hands clasped behind her back like a little adult, she declared, "The Beletu family believes in survival of the fittest. Even fratricide is encouraged. You only value rational choices and the family's interests. Your cold-blooded tools. Am I right?" Hearing this, the man finally relented. "Will you be my daughter?" he asked. She agreed without hesitation, her swiftness piquing the Duke's curiosity. "Because Daddy's handsome," she replied, the truth being that he resembled her favorite character. Silence descended upon the room. She emphasized again, "Becoming your daughter is my choice, not yours." The man nodded in resignation. Then one last request. "I won't make you regret bringing me back, but don't treat me like a sacrificial pawn. I'm Viola. I want you to truly love me." She wanted to fulfill Viola's dream, not just be called Daddy, but to have a real father. Only the tense thumping of hearts filled the air. She mentally patted herself on the back. Unexpectedly, the man let out a low chuckle. Interesting. Suddenly, a wave of killing intent enveloped her, a searing pain ripping through her body. "It's just a dream. Why does it hurt so much?" She vaguely heard the man's praise. "You're quite resilient." The suffocating pressure vanished. Gasping for breath, she thought, "I need to survive." "I won't kill you myself," he said. Yet he found the vividness of the dream strange. Transmigrated into the villainous adopted daughter of a family of lunatics. She intended to maintain her persona to protect herself, but unexpectedly charmed countless madmen, becoming their beloved pet. Born with blood-red eyes, she had, with mere shards of glass, killed the slave traders who kidnapped her. An untrained 7-year-old, she seemed a natural-born killer. Finding this astonishing, the man adopted her, but her mature thinking was completely unlike a child's. Hearing this, the butler recalled how the girl, though slightly nervous, had boldly negotiated with the Duke. Only unwavering mental fortitude could conquer fear. The discerning butler's opinion of the girl shifted slightly. The Duke pictured her tugging his sleeve, pleading for his love. No one from Beleta had ever been so candid, so openly asking to be loved. The man suddenly grew intensely curious. What were her chances of survival in Beletu? This prompted the butler to ponder. Meanwhile, the girl panicked. Why hadn't she woken up? 2 days had passed. Could this be the legendary transmigration? And into Viola, the adopted daughter of the iron-blooded duke, infamous for orchestrating the deaths of thousands? She forced herself to calm down. This was a place where survival depended on proving one's worth. First, she had to gain the Beletu family's acknowledgement as one of their own. Then, she needed to ensure the eldest daughter became the heir. After all, if it weren't for Viola, he would have smoothly inherited the title. Once the heir was chosen, the war between the siblings would end. She didn't want to end up like Viola, losing everything, with no one left by her side. What would be the point? In her past life, abandoned by her parents, she had endured a difficult childhood filled with mockery and lovelessness. Yet, she studied hard, becoming the envy of everyone. Who knew she'd wake up in a book? This time with a family, with a father. It had to be better than her last life, right? Quickly adjusting her mindset, she recalled the book's plot. Thinking of the Duke's question, she asked the butler about her survival rate. The answer, less than 10%. Even Viola's survival rate was so low. It spoke volumes about this place's dangers. But the butler in the study said, I think it's less than 40%. At this point, he didn't know that she was playing the role of his adopted daughter exceptionally well. And Heron had the ability to see through people. Thus, he could discern Viola's genuine yearning for family and her deep affection for him. Yet, he couldn't comprehend the source of these emotions. He was unaware that he resembled her most beloved character. So, he assigned Jenin to the girl as her official butler. This decision startled Jenin. He felt it was a waste of talent, but he couldn't defy the Duke's will. She, too, was preparing for the arrival of the first madman character. To survive, she played the ruthless adopted daughter. As a result, she unexpectedly became the darling of the eccentric family. Even the formidable, top-tier butler was assigned to her as a personal attendant by her dear father. The madman and the girl pretending to be mad locked eyes. The man's smile held a hidden danger. A maid personally opening the door for me? Next time, simply give the order. It should be a butler who opens the door. Hearing this, she instantly understood. The test had begun. In the book, he was a ruthless individual who had slain countless elite knights. Initially, he hadn't accepted the protagonist as a true member of the Beletu family. He constantly evaluated Viola to determine her suitability as his master. Therefore, this matter couldn't simply be brushed aside. Are you reprimanding me? She asked, her tone sharp and emotionless. Her response pleased him. Lowering her head, she admitted her mistake. He pressed his advantage. Direct eye contact is meant to convey advice, not a reprimand, he admonished. She knew that to survive in Beletu, she had to maintain authority and command respect. Then, she needed to turn those around her into allies. And the butler's role was to ensure their master became the heir. Failure meant death. Success meant wielding immense power. Therefore, she had to earn his approval. I've heard the butlers are particularly important, so I wanted to confirm their appearance personally. That's why I opened the door myself. The man knelt on one knee, a beguiling smile on his face. This is my appearance. The girl didn't hesitate to praise him. But at the same time, she delivered a subtle warning. I don't care about the content of your words, but I can't stand your attitude. A powerful killing intent startled the man. When releasing killing intent, her pupils would turn red. This was a characteristic of a naturally gifted assassin. Yet, her pupils hadn't changed color, even though he could feel the intense pressure. This only excited him further. Unexpectedly, the girl declared, I'm going to give you your first order. A mixture of excitement and shock surged through him, but he maintained his calm smile and agreed. Go and fetch a quill and the red-hot poison. It was a potent neurotoxin. The man's gaze seemed to pierce through her. He turned, his words laced with meaning. What role do you play in this household? To assist and monitor the young lady. Then be true to your role. Do what you're supposed to do. Hearing this, the man obediently refrained from further questions. He stated he would return in precisely 12 minutes. Seeing the man leave, she wiped the cold sweat from her brow, her heart still pounding. The man returned precisely on time. Not a second more, not a second less. He handed her everything. According to the book's plot, the twisted fifth young master Wei Jin, would arrive tomorrow. He had been trained to kill from birth, growing into an innocent-looking killing machine. But with him by her side, wouldn't she be safe? She vowed to do everything in her power to survive, feigning madness within a family of madmen. She had perfectly tamed a top-tier butler to serve as her manservant. Yet, the innocent-looking killing machine was now at her door. The girl didn't flinch. Calmly sipping her tea, she invited him in. He was her most troublesome rival, and also a promising killer. Young Master Wei Jin Beleda entered, immediately sneering, "Someone like you should never dream of becoming my sister." But Viola, armed with her knowledge of the book, understood his disdain wasn't genuine. In truth, he longed for a sister. When Viola had been adopted, the boy had been overjoyed. However, his mother had quickly crushed his hopes. A lowly person without Beleda blood has no right to be your sister. She's just a sacrifice. These words had made him realize he wasn't worthy of being her brother. So, he was determined to show the girl just how terrifying he could be. The two clashed fiercely, their relationship souring from that point on. Unwilling to follow the original plot, Viola teased, "If I'm not your sister, then what am I?" Recalling his mother's words, he declared with absolute certainty, "You're a sacrifice." Viola's indifferent reaction threw him off balance. She was supposed to react angrily, attack him, and then, after he won, he'd be acknowledged as her older brother. Frustrated, he complained, "I insulted you." "You're supposed to get angry." Thoughtfully, he set down his teacup. "Wait here." This infuriated Wei Jin. In the next instant, a quill pen grazed his cheek, piercing the wall behind him. Their conflict was about to explode. Yet, he touched the small wound and marveled, "Oh, you threw that well." Viola maintained her wicked grin, but her hand trembled. She had only meant to frighten him. She had accidentally hurt him. After his compliment, his tone turned dangerous. Was that a warning? Then, his expression shifted again. He burst into laughter. "What an interesting sacrifice. You really are like a madman. So can I hug you?" His adorable expression almost made her lose her composure. But a Beleda hug wasn't simply a gesture of affection. It was a way to analyze body type and identify weaknesses. Seeing him whine softly, "Please," Viola relented. She, too, would act like a Beledu. Embracing him, Wei Jin laughed heartily. "I like you very much. I wonder which of us will kill the other first. I am curious." Viola recalled how, in the book, the boy had relentlessly pursued her day and night, vowing to bring her over to his side. As they embraced, their hug was suddenly interrupted. Jinan, smiling pleasantly, introduced himself as Viola's personal butler. "The Duke has given a young lady 10 days. For 10 days, please refrain from any actions that might provoke her." He had clearly seen through Wei Jin's intentions with the hug. "Otherwise, I will report it to the Duke faithfully. But we were just talking. Could you please let go of her first?" Wei Jin pouted, annoyed. He reluctantly released Viola. "I'll see you next time." Then sister, sacrifice. As soon as he finished speaking, he collapsed. The world spun, and he felt like he was floating. Viola calmly instructed Jinan to take him back to his room. The red-hot poison had worked, but he would likely regain consciousness soon. Still, she had to admire. What a dramatic first meeting it had been. This round, Viola had clearly won. "So that's why you asked me to get the quill and the red-hot poison?" Jinan asked, outwardly calm, but inwardly panicking. "Please don't ask me why." If he asked, she'd have to explain about transmigrating into the book and having the plot at her fingertips. But Jinan persisted. "Can I ask you a question?" Jinan's words sent Viola's heart racing. Had he seen through her? Fighting for survival in this family of villains. She had just managed to subdue her innocently demonic older brother by feigning madness. The madman stared back at her, but couldn't understand why she had hugged Wei Jin. Viola breathed a sigh of relief. He wasn't asking why she had prepared the poison and quill beforehand. So, she offered a partial truth. A hug allows you to grasp your opponent's physical weaknesses. But young Master Wei Jin could also learn my weaknesses that way. Jinan smiled, then posed a question. "Do you think I will be a problem?" Viola's response stunned the butler. A 7-year-old child from the slums. If she hadn't learned these things, then it could only be attributed to a natural killer's instinct. Jinan was thoroughly impressed. "Your confidence is truly captivating, my lady." He then pulled out a dagger, startling Viola. But instead of attacking, he gently touched her dress, carefully snipping a loose thread from her sleeve.